like scary movies.
Uh-huh.
What's your favorite scary movie?
I met this 6-year-old child with this blank, pale, emotionless face and the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Well, just wait here for a while. See what happens.
Sweet, innocent Jason.
You shouldn't have buried me. I'm not dead.
Here's Johnny. The son of a bitch, you moved the cemetery, but you left the bodies, didn't you? The son of a bitch, you left the bodies and you only moved the headstones. You only moved the headstones.
Here he comes now. I'm getting out of here.
Groovy.
All right, everybody, welcome back to Scripts and Screams, where we talk all things film, television, and horror. I am your host, Christopher M. Carter, and today is October 1st, 2020, officially the best month of the worst year ever. What we want to do is to celebrate these 31 days of awesomeness, which, by the way, happens to be my favorite month if you don't already know. I want to talk about horror films, mazes, basically all the really cool immersive Halloween / horror things that I've been able to see or be a part of or witness, and just kind of bring some light on that, since 2020 is really going to not allow us to do those things this year, which 2020 has been miserable from across the board. And I guess another victim will be Halloween in October and all spooky season. But here at Cartering Films and Scripts and Screams, we are going to do our best to make sure that it's not going to go quietly into that good night, because Halloween never dies. So the first thing I want to talk about is a film that I saw a little bit ago, premiering on Shudder, which if you don't have Shudder, you should definitely get Shudder. It is amazing in October with all the really cool stuff they have. It's a film called Scare Me. And before we get that, I want to do this. Any film review that I do for the month of Halloween is going to be 15 minutes. All right, so I'm not going to prattle on for an hour or 2 hours like most podcasts and talk about the ins and the outs of it. I'm going to give you the overview. I'm going to spin it neutrally as best I can, and I'm going to let you make the decision if you want to go see that film or not. All right, on my rating system, which, oh, by the way, will consists of 0 to 5 hatchets. 1 hatchet is probably, 0 hatchets is the worst score you can get. I can't imagine anybody getting a 0, and 5 being the best. So I'm going to start my counter. 15 minutes to talk about the film Scare Me starts now. Okay, so I was cruising through Shudder today thinking I'm going to ingest all the horror content I can possibly do. 2020 might suck. Halloween might suck this year. Spooky season may be a bit watered down, but by God, I'm going to make sure that I get my piece. So after watching a couple really bad horror movies, which we'll get to later, I found this film called Scare Me. It's a Shudder exclusive, which if you don't have Shudder, you should definitely get Shudder. It is one of those stations that if you do enjoy horror, it will pay for itself in the first, let's call it 7 days of you having the service. Especially now going into spooky season, it's one of those services that kind of like AMC will curate something for the next 31 days. And so Scare Me falls into that category. It was released officially today. I hadn't seen a trailer for it. The cover art looked pretty cool. And I guess the log line from what I gathered was basically 3 people hole up in a cabin and tell each other scary stories. Now, when I think that, I think of the filmmaker in me starts thinking, oh, well, these people are just going to be used as a shell, and then they're going to tell their story, and then we're going to zip into whatever horrific kind of world that they're telling with their stories. But that is not true at all. In fact, Scare Me, and let me talk about who's in it first. Aya Cash plays Fanny. Aya is now kind of blowing up because she is currently killing it at Stormfront in The Boys. The second season of The Boys, her storyline is really becoming interesting with Homelander. So if you haven't seen The Boys, and definitely watch The Boys, although it's not technically a horror series, so we're not going to touch on it too much here, but it definitely is something that has some very horrific lensing towards America and some of those freedoms and whatnot. But it is interesting nonetheless. So she's killing it as Stormfront. But in this, she is wonderful. And I'll get to the story in a moment. We have Josh Rubin, who I believe it's his first feature film. He is the writer, director, and one of the producers. Apparently, he has done quite a few videos for College Humor. He's directed pieces with The Late Late Show and Adam Ruins Everything, as well as being part of the Spotify's Last Degree of Kevin Bacon. So he's definitely an up-and-comer to watch. And really, the film kind of revolves around these two people, and the premise is very simple. These two writers, they take an escape, they do a writer's retreat, not together, independently. This is Josh's story, without a doubt. So Josh, a struggling writer, feels that he needs to kind of get out and unplug, takes his laptop, goes into a secluded cabin, and he just intends to pound out his screenplay / novel. All right, we've all been there as writers, so I get that point. On a run, he runs into Aya, who plays Fanny, and Fanny, as he discovers through conversation, is a world-renowned writer, horror writer, and just kind of living his best life. She's young, she's beautiful, she's witty, she's smart, and he's none of those things. He is older, he struggles to kind of find something that comes so naturally to her, and it's a real kind of shift in his lens of how his life could have gone, and I think that plays into it. So fast forward, power goes out, and these two people now are stuck together in the cabin where they must wait out a storm, right? And so through banter and conversation, Fanny and Fred is Josh Rubin plays Fred, they go back and forth and tell these scary stories. And of course, Fanny, being the accomplished writer, really tells a wonderfully nuanced story. And then when it's Josh's turn, she's just poking him. No, I don't believe you. No, this isn't better. Give me some more details. And she really pulls out and kind of peels the onion of his insecurity when it comes to his writing. And I think the cleverness in this film is their chemistry. And there's a point when you believe that they really trust each other. And there's even a moment throughout here where there could be, throughout the film, where there are very, very short romantic undertones, which would have been a huge disservice, because these characters are so great when they're going at each other, when one is kind of picking at another and, just finding little details to kind of pull on that string. But their chemistry throughout the entire film is magnificent. I had my reservations about it for a while. It's basically a play, and I feel like this could be converted to a play very, very easily. It's one location, and I think there are 5 credited actors in the entire film, and the runtime is around 2 hours and 40 minutes, I believe. So it is something that the chemistry held by Fanny and Fred really kind of hold this piece together, because we don't have that moment where we zap out into the werewolf storyline that Fred tells, or we don't go into the kind of weird, creepy grandfather / granddaughter storyline that Fanny creates. We're always in that same cabin with a single fireplace, kind of lighting it, and these two actors just playing off of each other. I will say they do a really cool job, and if anybody's been to theater or seen a play with a high production value, this will be familiar, where as the characters are talking, it's not breaking the fourth wall, but I would say it's maybe breaking the 3.5 wall, because as a creepy story occurs, we have voiceovers that take the place of the actors. So in one moment, we have Fanny telling her story about a little girl being harassed by this really old grandfather who might be Transylvanian / vampiric. And then as she speaks in that kind of dialect, we really get pulled into it. It's almost like listening to a book, kind of being spoken to, and being acted out by specific actors, which is really, really cool. So then, we have these different sensory moments that kind of really keep us interested. And I was worried about that. I was worried that I would get bored with a single location. I had never really heard of these actors, outside of course, Stormfront, which again is amazing. But the longer you spend, the more time you spend with these people, the more engrossed you become in the story. And I think that is a really, really big compliment you can give to the writer, to the director, to the actors in it, where you basically have, again, 2 people for the majority of it, 3 for maybe about 15 minutes of it in a single location, and you're just kind of locked there. And it's just so interesting. It is a horror comedy, although I would say the horror part of it really doesn't come into effect until maybe the last 20 minutes. And even then it's not heavy-handed horror. I do think that, again, the chemistry between the two, between Fanny and Fred, is just outstanding. It really is great, and we begin to like them together, not romantically, but as a partners. And I think that's really interesting. So as the story progresses, it gets to a point where it becomes very dark, and I think I'm not going to spoil it. This is a non-spoiler review. This is for me to try and convince you or to dissuade you from going to go see something, where Fanny and Fred their differences kind of come to a head. And I will say that throughout the film, there are lighter tones. It is kind of jokey and happy and sarcastic and goofy. And again, there's a slight romantic moment here. So, as an audience member, you're feeling very vulnerable. You're feeling very comfortable. Not like in a horror film where, it's an interesting psychological fact, in case you didn't know, that when you cross your arms, you are blocking yourself, you're protecting yourself, you're holding yourself. If you're touching your body, hands on your knees, if you're touching your elbow, your wrist, if you're holding your hands, those are all signs, even if you don't know you're doing them, that you are protecting yourself. A lot of people will do this during horror movies, so keep your eye out and maybe you can spot the people that are scared. In this film, when you're comfortable, you don't ever do that because you don't ever feel threatened until there's a moment in the film where that changes. And I think that is the way that this is done, in the writing and in the storytelling, and most importantly, the way that the performances are delivered. Josh and Aya, they just do a great job in this whole thing, but specifically in the last 20 minutes, when it's very different than what they have done for the past hour and 20 minute runtime. So it's awesome to kind of see that. And as you go into it, you can really appreciate the different levels that the actors kind of went through to deliver that performance. So it's very cool. I definitely would say see this movie. That's all I'm going to give you about it. The performances are wonderful. The chemistry is great. It's definitely worth the price of admission. So I would definitely check it out. Rotten Tomatoes, it currently has a score of 84%. And an audience rating of 100%, but those numbers are very new. It just came out. There are only 5 votes tallied for the audience, so that 100% is definitely going to change. Rotten Tomatoes being 84%, with only 25 people voted, that I'm sure will change too, although not too much. I think it's a solid 84% score. I think that's very fair. I think some of the highlights of the film, the pacing, I think, you do kind of trot into it. The first maybe quarter of the movie, the first maybe 20 minutes, you're still kind of figuring it out. What is this? Because we don't know. It's not billed as a comedy horror film right off the bat. You don't know that it's got that kind of genre bending writing and storytelling. So for me, the hardest part to get in this movie was the beginning, but that only lasted for about 15 minutes until, Fanny kind of comes into the film. And then at that point, just again, their chemistry is just off the charts. So it moves fast. The chemistry is awesome. The lighting, as a cinematographer, speaking about the lighting, I understand the challenges of it, but they did a wonderful job in this. Not a lot of atmosphere, meaning not a lot of fog or haze. But they did a great job mixing the warm and the cool lights, which, by the way, that's kind of a big Hollywood trend and a cinematographer trend. So just a little nugget of secret sauce there. If you see blue in the frame, look for orange, because it's like your eye is always going to look for those. And if it sees both of them in the same frame, it makes a nice picture, for lack of a better explanation at this point. It's a wonderful film. I would definitely say see it. It is great chemistry. It is very charming. It's definitely a kind of kickback, and it's a day. It's a great day one of first day of October, film. I mean, we've got 31 more days of this, or 30 more days of this, depending upon. I might watch a couple more tonight. But this was a really cool one. I had no expectations going in. I had never really heard of this film. But I'm so glad that I actually, sat down and watched it for the entire runtime, and the actors are wonderful. I would definitely see it. My 15 minutes is coming to a very, very quick close here, so I'm going to wrap this up. My Hatchet score, I give this 3.5 out of 5 hatchets. I say the two big pluses are the chemistry and the pacing. And if I had to pick a minus, I would say that it starts off just a little slow. But I understand. We have to see Fred's plight. We have to know that he's there and he's struggling and he's by himself. And that's why when we have Fanny kind of come into it, it's basically a snow globe that gets shaken up, and everything that kind of falls down is where the magic lies. And I believe there is magic in this film. So again, I say 3.5 out of 5. I would say go see it. It is streaming exclusively on Shudder right now. I don't know for how long, but I would guess until at least the end of the month. But yes, great job. It was a really good film. I wouldn't say it's awesome, but it's really good. All right. Well, anyway, I've got 1 minute and 25 seconds left, so that's great. Great timing. So anyway, this is episode 1 of our 31 Days of October. I will check in later. I will most likely have a guest with me, but if I don't, hey, it'll just be me, you, and whoever else. Okay? So for Scripts and Screams, Cartering Films, this is Chris Carter. 31 days. Let's enjoy this, people. Have a great night.